Imam Mohammad Tawhid's The Tragedy of Islam is not a gentle critique, but a theological autopsy performed without anesthetic. It is the confession of a man who loves the patient but must declare the cause of death, a terminal case of dogmatic rigidity contracted in the 9th century and allowed to fester ever since. The book's power lies in its brutal insider's admission that the greatest enemy of Islam is not the West, nor the Zionists, nor the Kuffar, but Islam itself as it currently exists. The imperial catastrophe and the frozen God. Tawhid's central heretical thesis is that Islam's greatest historical victory was its greatest spiritual defeat. The lightning-fast military conquests that created an empire strangled the nascent spiritual faith in its cradle. We conquered the world with the sword of Khalid ibn al-Walid, but we enslaved our own intellect with the chains of al-Ghazali. He argues that the Quranic revelations received in Mecca, mystical, pluralistic, focused on inner faith and social justice, were utterly subsumed by the later Medinan revelations, obsessed with law, punishment, and political supremacy. The ideal Islamic state, as codified by the later clerics, is not the humble community of the Prophet in Mecca, but the imperial powerhouse of the Umayyads in Damascus. Allah, in our dogma, ceased to be a God of infinite mystery and became a celestial CEO for a 7th century Arab tribal corporation. His divine will was reduced to a corporate charter we call the Sharia. He savages the concept of the Golden Age as a period of Islamic success in spite of orthodoxy, not because of it. The caliphs of Baghdad, he claims, were de facto heretics. Al-Mamun, drinking wine and debating Aristotle with Christian scholars in the House of Wisdom, was a better Muslim than any bearded zealot in a cave today. Why? Because he understood that God's greatest gift was the mind, not the whip. The Mu'tazilites, whom we now condemn, came closer to a mature faith than the Asharite literalists who won the theological civil war and plunged us into 1,000 years of intellectual darkness. The Quran, a prison of the divine word. This is Tawhid's most dangerous admission. He does not deny the Quran's divinity, but he reframes its nature in a way orthodoxy considers blasphemy. We commit shirk al-Quran, the idolatry of the book. We worship the ink and parchment, the literal Arabic words, more than the transcendent, unknowable God they attempt to describe. He argues that by declaring the Quran uncreated and co-eternal with God, theologians made the text itself divine, rendering it immune to historical criticism or contextual interpretation. He points to specific verses, stating, "To believe that Surah An-Nisa, with its rules for managing 7th century captives, represents the eternal, perfect word of the creator of 1,000,000,000,000 galaxies is not piety, it is philosophical infantilism. It confuses the vessel for the wine, the map for the territory." His proposed solution is the ultimate heresy. We must have the courage to say that the Quran is perfect in its spiritual guidance, but incomplete in its temporal legislation. Its completion requires us, humanity, to use the reason God gave us to evolve its ethical core. The Sharia, the sanctified tribal code. Tawhid performs a brutal dissection of Sharia, separating it entirely from any notion of divine justice. The Sharia is not God's law, it is the urf, the custom of the Hijaz, sanctified and frozen in time. He lists the hudud punishments, not as justice, but tribal deterrence logic dressed in divine mandate. Chopping off the hand of a starving thief in a society with no social safety net is not justice, it's divine sadism. Stoning an adulterer is a barbaric spectacle, not a reflection of a merciful God. We have made God into a celestial thug. On the treatment of women and minorities, he is scathing. The Ahal al-Dima system is not a model of tolerance, it is a model of institutionalized humiliation and apartheid, designed to remind the conquered of their subjugation. The rules of inheritance and testimony that value a woman as half a man are not divine wisdom, they are the fossilized misogyny of a patriarchal desert culture, and to defend them today, is to call God a misogynist, the Prophet, the flawless man who never was. Tawhid directly attacks the doctrine of the Prophet's infallibility, arguing that it has created a cult of personality that stifles all moral progress. We are commanded to emulate a man who married a 9-year-old child, who ordered the execution of his critics, and who led military campaigns. To insist that every one of these actions is eternally perfect and worthy of emulation is to create a moral and intellectual prison. He continues, the tragedy is that by making Muhammad sinless, we have made him inhuman. We cannot relate to him. We can only mindlessly imitate the superficial details of his life, the length of his beard, the way he ate dates, while ignoring the core of his message, radical monotheism and social reform. We worship the Sunnah and ignore the Spirit. Conclusion: the necessary heresy. Tawhid's final chapter is a call for what can only be described as a mass apostasy from orthodox, political Islam to save its spiritual heart. The Ummah is not united. It is a brainwashed herd, led by clerics who are nothing more than gatekeepers for a dying paradigm. Our mosques are not houses of God, they are ideological indoctrination centers for Saudi-styled Wahhabism. His final devastating admission: the greatest act of faith a Muslim can perform today is to commit heresy, to reject the closure of the gates of ijtihad, to read the Quran with the mind God gave us, not with the brainwashed obedience of a slave, to separate the timeless message of La ilaha illallah, that there is no God but God, from the man-made, time-bound, and often brutal political project that was built upon it. The soul of Islam can only be saved by sacrificing its rigid political body on the altar of reason and contemporary ethics. Otherwise, the tragedy will only deepen into a farce.
The book's effect was explosive, causing profound controversy by framing core tenets from the literal divinity of the Quran to the infallibility of the Prophet as obstacles to spiritual progress. Hailed by secularists and liberal Muslims as a courageous call for reformation, it was simultaneously condemned by the global Orthodox establishment as the ultimate heresy, leading to widespread denunciations, fatwas against the author, and intense debate about the very soul of modern Islam.